Hey there everyone, do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and this next series of videos is going to be about Magical Book 4, Liber Abba. So I'm going to go through chapter by chapter, and with no further ado, today's chapter 1 of Book 1, Asana. So to start off with a quote by Crowley from the chapter, it says, "A man wishes to control his mind, to be able to think one chosen thought for as long as he will without interruption," end quote. And I follow that up with Liber, verse 17, where it says, "Fixed thought is a means to an end. Therefore pay attention to the power of silent thought and meditation. The material act is but the outward expression of thy thought. And therefore hath it been said that the thought of foolishness is sin. Thought is the commencement of action. And if chance thought can produce much effect, what cannot fixed thought do?" End quote. So, before we even get into fixed thought, which really takes place in Liber E, we're going to start off with Asana, which is the beginning of discipline, stillness of body, which then eventually you'll go into stillness of breath, and then stillness of mind. But, as we'll see as I read some of my notes in front of me, one of the biggest problems with stillness of body stems from the mind, ego, discomforts, the ego fearing its, I don't want to necessarily say demise, but threats, its imminent threat of being in control. So, let's move on. The first problem of Asana is the rebellious nature of the body, which resists stillness with all its might. Before getting to that, Crowley writes about the word Asana. The word Asana means posture, but as with all words which have caused debate, its exact meaning has altered, and it's used in several distinct senses by various authors. Patanjali says, "Asana is that which is firm and pleasant." This may be taken as meaning the result of success in the practice. Again, Samkhya says, "Posture is that which is steady and easy." And again, he also says, "Any posture which is steady and easy is an asana." There is no other rule. Any posture will do. Yes, literally any posture can be your asana, but keep in mind these three things. 1. Any posture that you try to use for asana will be uncomfortable, as I'll soon talk more about that. 2. The posture you pick is the one you'll be keeping for a very long time until you reach success. It is not good to gain satisfaction in a certain pose and then switch to another one. You will be starting not from scratch exactly, but certainly you'll be moving backward, as you will need to reacclimate to your new position or posture. And point 3, certain poses are recommended because A, they activate certain energies and points of energy in your body, and B, they have been used by many others. Thus a holiness has become attached to such postures. Much like words or rituals that are used by many people over many years, postures used by great yogis have metaphoric connotations attached to them, and this can aid in many ways, seen and unseen. Briefly, the word yoga is also important. It can literally be translated from Sanskrit as union. Yoga means union. Specifically union with the divine within. A footnote on the bottom of the page in this first chapter on yoga, Asana, about the word yoga, catches my eye as it's interesting. It says, quote, "Yoga is the general name for that form of meditation which aims at the uniting of subject and object. For yog, Y-O-G, is the root from which are derived the Latin word yugam and the English word yoke," end quote. This implies the Hebrew character lamed, a yoke, or specifically an ox yoke, which beats the beast of burden forward in its labor to till the soil so it is suitable for growing a big harvest. This is a great analogy for the great work, as you will be growing your own tree of life within yourself through the Liber practice. And this is all about discipline. Thus, yoga is an excellent tool, one to beat yourself into submission of performing the great work, that is, transcending the ego and attaining union with the divine. Now, about discomforts of asana. No matter if you pick the most comfortable posture you could get into, once you try staying in that position with the intention to remain absolutely still, you are likely to become hyper-aware of your predicament. Often the mind will rebel, and this occurs with nerve endings sending hundreds of signals throughout the body, informing the mind that you are absolutely uncomfortable. When you gain true mastery of your temple, your body and mind, this will go away, and that is a good acid test to know when you may call yourself a master of Asana. But until then, you will have discomforts. When you make your first steps of progress, you will get minutes that you find stillness comfortable, and in my experience, it is accompanied with a state of body rigidity. You will be solid and tense as a rock, but still and loose at the same time. Further on posture, it is often recommended that the posture you choose for your long-term practice of Asana should be one upright with, quote, the head, neck, and spine kept vertical and straight for reasons connected with the subject of prana, end quote, which will be spoken about in the next video of this series. If you are using Asana as a meditation in conjunction with other practices, such as a wind down from Hatha Yoga or for meditation upon a certain object, then you may choose any number of other postures that are far more suitable. The corpse pose, Shavasana, where you're laying down on your back, is good after Hatha Yoga, and almost any posture for meditation upon an object is fine so long as you could see said object. On the second page of this essay on Asana, Crowley writes, quote, the extreme of Asana is practiced by those yogins who remain in one position without moving, except in the case of absolute necessity, during their whole lives. One should not criticize such persons without a thorough knowledge of the subject. Such knowledge has not yet been published. I did not do this, it will not be necessary for their followers, end quote. Here, Crowley is referring possibly to the Buddha who meditated under the Bodhi tree for 49 days without moving, or some other yogis that live in an ashram and seek to stay in asana for as long as they can. In my own experience, when undergoing some of my more intense bouts of magical attainment, I often would be seeking any external remedies to overcome my life's most severe karma. In fact, Kundalini experiences, which can be quite frightening and full of the horrors of self-awareness, have caused me to make a mess of things at times, and then seek ritual practice to atone. Looking back months later, I realized that had I just opted for asana, it would have taken a little time longer to get through such experiences, but it would have been much safer and certainly caused the same outcome of attainment in the long run. Still, if you are sure-footed on the path, no matter what you do will inevitably bring you to the same destination. Crowley highlights this line where he has written, quote, there is a sort of happy medium between rigidity and limpness. The muscles are not to be strained, and yet they are not allowed to be altogether slack. Braced is perhaps the best. A sense of physical alertness is desirable. Think of the tiger about to spring, or the oarsman waiting for the gun. After a little, there will be cramp and fatigue. The student must now set his teeth and go through with it. The minor sensations of itching, etc. will be found to pass away, if they are resolutely neglected. But the cramp and fatigue may be expected to increase until the end of the practice, end quote. Here I caution you especially. When I started my asana practice, I had chosen the God posture of asana, seated upright with my hands on my knees at right angles to the floor, head and neck held up, chest tight, but loose enough not to constrict my breath even a little. Well, after some months had gone by, I had caused severe tendinitis in my right hip and had to stop for a while and begin Hatha Yoga, using such practices that opened my hips until the pain stopped and the joints healed. Just be aware of your body. No practice is worth causing irreversible damage, and even something as simple as asana can have unseen dangers lurking around the corner. Pain is to be expected, though. In fact, you will likely have a lot of cramps. You must learn to differentiate what cramps are normal, or if you are actually hurting yourself for something more severe or permanent. Sitting with tight muscles will do that. But if you go forward day after day, 30 minutes at a time, aiming for perfect stillness, you will find that you are more comfortable in your asana than any other position eventually. You may at times dread doing your practice, but persist you must. Now, Crowley gives another warning, and this one pertaining to the egotistical reaction of picking a posture which is too easy. I think it best to quote him again. And he says, on the other hand, if the student pay no attention, fail to watch the body, an opposite phenomenon can occur. He shifts to ease himself without knowing that he has done so. To avoid this, Choose a position which naturally is rather cramped and awkward, and in which slight changes are not sufficient to bring ease. Otherwise, for the first few days, the student may even imagine that he has conquered the position. In fact, in all these practices, their apparent simplicity is such that the beginner is likely to wonder what all the fuss is about, perhaps to think that he is specially gifted. Similarly, a man who has never touched a golf club will take his umbrella and carelessly hole a putt, which would frighten the best putter alive. In a few days, however, in all cases, the discomforts will begin. As you go on, they will begin earlier in the course of the hour's exercise. The disinclination to practice at all may become almost unconquerable. One must warn the student against imagining that some other position would be easier to master than the one he has selected. Once you begin to change about, you are lost." End quote. This goes too for one who joins fraternal orders one after another without completing the work of one which he has left. They go on making little progress and then have wasted their time and must start over from scratch. It is better to pick something after you have researched and heavily deliberated about your desired outcome. Then stick with what you've chosen, no matter how difficult you find the affair. For some words of encouragement, Crowley writes, quote, "Perhaps the best reward is not so far distant. It will happen one day that the pain is suddenly forgotten. The fact of the presence of the body is forgotten, and one will realize that during the whole of one's previous life the body was always on the borderland of consciousness, and that consciousness a consciousness of pain. And at this moment one will further realize, with an indescribable feeling of relief, that not only is this position, which has been so painful, the very ideal of physical comfort, but that all other conceivable positions of the body are uncomfortable. This feeling represents success." End quote. We're almost finished with this topic, but for two last points. Firstly, literature. Crowley writes, quote, "Hindu books such as the Shiva Samhita give countless postures, many, perhaps most of them, impossible for the average adult European. The positions illustrated in Liber E form the best guide." So you could take a look at some of those examples from Liber E that I'm posting here. End quote. I also recommend getting a copy of Crowley's 8 lectures on yoga, which is very helpful, as well as the books about yoga and Eastern philosophy that could be found in the AA curriculum. These include Raja Yoga, Hatha Yoga, Jnana Yoga, the Tao Te King, and anything by Vivekananda or the Buddha. This chapter ends by Crowley stating, quote, "Other results of this practice are described by Hindu authors, but they do not concern us at this present. Our first obstacle has been removed, and we can continue with the others." End quote. I, however, while on the subject, will add a couple points. While in Asana, many interesting things may occur. You may get various hallucinations of sight, smell, or touch. These generally should be ignored unless they are somehow of extreme importance, such as your holy guardian angel appearing, but that is unlikely if you are a new practitioner, and should be scrutinized to the extreme point because it is likely delusion and will not allow you to not have to continue with your beginner's practices. After a long enough period of practice in your asana, you may get visuals of your past lives. These are generally good, as they may help you establish what karma you have and what you need to accomplish in this incarnation. There are also 3 main phases of asana success. The first of these phases is getting past the discomforts of stillness of body. Working towards a full 60 minutes without any movement whatsoever is generally a good goal to begin with. The next phase that occurs is that despite being absolutely still, your body may move on its own, and you will be fully unaware of it. This can range from tremors to muscle spasms so strong that it looks like your body is jerking violently in various directions. Crowley wrote about something similar he observed in his first yoga teacher, Alan Bennett. Crowley wrote that he walked into a room in which Bennett was practicing his asana. I believe he was in the dragon posture. And somehow, Bennett was as stiff as a board in his posture, and yet he had somehow ended up horizontal across the floor, though still perfectly rigid and in the pose. So much so that Crowley walked over to him and settled him upright and left the room without Bennett being even the slightest aware that he had moved or been moved by Crowley. Now the third phase of asana would be levitation. And this comes after violent muscle spasms. Overall, I find this to be useless, as you cannot use this power to float where you will, and aside from looking really cool, it doesn't really serve any other purpose. But it's been mentioned by Crowley in lectures on yoga and various other places. So first you'll get past the discomforts of stillness, then you'll get these violent jerkings of your body, then you would actually get levitation. Whether that's true or not, I've never experienced it, nor have I seen it firsthand, but I have gotten perfect stillness for quite lengthy periods of time. So with that, this concludes the video. I plan on doing chapter by chapter going through book 4, so if this helps anybody, please share this around. Get the word out that this is a useful channel if you think so, and love is the law, love and will. You be well. Take care.